Welcome, everybody, to this month's edition of the Nerdthusiast Movie Podcast. My name's Dane. I'll be a bit of the host today. I'm here with Brandon Foster. He's going to help us go through the movie Top Gun, which just came out a little bit ago. Say hi, Brandon.
Hey, what's going on?
So Brandon's going to be here. We're going to ask a couple of more specific questions about Top Gun and some of the things that are a little bit too Hollywood, probably.
A little bit, yeah.
I'm. I was never in the Air Force. You were, and we'll go over that. But I enjoyed it without knowing too specific of stuff. Before we start, make sure that everybody goes to nerdthusiast.com and check out. We always have new blogs going up. We always have people writing a bunch of stuff. We have pretty much a new show every day, if not every other day. You know what I mean? So there's plenty of stuff out there. I do want to give a quick shout out. Bernardo is one of our Patreons. Remember, go to patreon.com/nerdthusiast. If you're already not there, check out our different tiers and everything. But Bernardo, we're going to give you a shout out for this movie. And at the end, we'll give you another shout out. I'll tell you why. That's pretty much it. So we're going to talk about Top Gun. Top Gun is the sequel, of course, to 1986's original Top Gun. That was directed by Tony Scott. This one's directed by Joseph Kosinski, starring Tom Cruise, of course. Brandon, let me just get your thoughts real fast. What do you think of the movie?
I absolutely loved it. When the movie finished, I leaned over to this older lady that I was sitting next to, and we had been talking before the movie started, and then we're both like, we've been waiting 30-something years for this movie to come out. And after it was over and the credits rolled, we both just kind of, the lights went up, we just kind of looked at each other. And I think I looked at her and said, I think that was worth the wait. And she was like, worth every second of the wait. I was eagerly anticipating this movie for quite some time, and I was very devastated that COVID, held up the release of this movie for a number of reasons. And even doing what I do in the Air Force, I was totally fine with hitting the make-believe button a little bit and just accepting that Hollywood has to do Hollywood things. And I absolutely loved every second of this movie. There's those movies where people actually clap during the movie, and you're like, all right, it's a movie. This one, there was actual times where people clapped, and I was like, I want to be on board with you on that one. Like, yes. I actually had like emotional reactions to this movie because of how invested I felt like I was in it.
Gotcha. So you are in there for. Let's talk about that for a few minutes. We'll put the movie on pause. We'll talk about that for a second. What is it that you do in the military? What is your job? How long have you been in the military?
So I've been in the Air Force for going on 15 years. I'm an Air Force intelligence officer, and really what I need to do is be able to provide expertise in geopolitical events, letting my commanders know what's going on in the world and why it's important and how it's going to affect our operations. And then I also have to be a threat systems expert, meaning I have to be able to look at our adversaries' weapon systems and say, here is how it works, here's how we defeat it.
Yeah, there's a lot of shit you can't talk about. So let me ask you, so seeing the first Top Gun, how old do you think you were? How old were you when the first Top Gun came out? Because I was a kid.
So I was 3 when the first Top Gun came out, but I vividly remember being like 5 or 6 and watching it for the first time because my dad was in the Air Force and my mom was in the Air Force as well. So that was kind of like granted, I understand it's a Navy movie, but it was still like a big movie that the entire family loved. And I think I've watched it with my dad a number of occasions. Fun fact that I read at one point, you can totally call bullshit on this if you want. When you watch the first Top Gun, the missile shot that you see, all those missile shots happening, they only were able to fire the missile one time in the first Top Gun because it cost so much money. And they just filmed it from different angles because they knew they were going to need multiple missile launches in the video. But when you watch the first Top Gun, only one missile was fired because it cost so much money.
Really?
Yeah.
I do know that even as a kid, when I saw the movie, I picked out there are multiple shots used over and over. Well, there's at least 1 or 2 shots that are duplicated in the big dog fight at the end. And I never miss it. And my girl recently watched the movie for the first time, maybe about 4 months ago. And when we're watching the movie, she even says that shot we already saw that shot. Mm-hmm. So yeah, when making that movie, Tony Scott directed that movie. There's a lot of model work in that movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's how they did a lot of the special effects in that. You know what I mean? And the old, stick someone in a fake cockpit and move them around a little bit and stuff like that. And there's a lot of that in that movie. This movie, of course, is the complete opposite of that. you know.
the, the last dogfight scene in the first Top Gun, I actually used that dogfight scene and clips of that dogfight scene to teach lessons about how radars work to my subordinates. And if you've ever seen the last dogfight scene in which they're like, "Oh, there's 5 bogies at 600 nautical miles traveling, whatever nautical miles an hour," and then all of a sudden the guy goes, "Oh, there's 6 bogies at whatever nautical miles an hour." I always use that to teach my lessons about radar resolution cells. So if you've ever seen that scene, you now
Right.
understand how radar resolution cells work and how enemies can actually hide inside of radar resolution cells.
Gotcha.
It's wild how the electromagnetic spectrum works, and you can talk about it all you want because it's everybody uses the electromagnetic spectrum.
And that's how they find them. That's how they see. All right. So let me ask you, just because
Yeah,
I'm incredibly ignorant to this. Okay, in every movie between submarine movies, they have to put something on screen for dumb people like me to understand. Like, okay, so look, this little because if they showed me, yeah, look, this blob is supposed to be something, like I wouldn't understand it. So they have to make movies and put
yeah,
little
yeah, yeah.
pictures of airplanes that are
Hmm.
turning as the radar sees them.
Yeah.
Is it
No,
anything like that?
no.
It's not like
They're
that at all,
usually
right?
there's symbology, and every radar is going to have its own different symbology, but it's never going to look like a little it's never going to look like a little airplane like traveling across your screen being like,
Right.
"Oh, there he is." you know
Exactly.
um there's symbology that shows you the direction of travel and how fast things are traveling when you look at your radar scope, but no, it's not going to look like an actual shape of a weapon, because
Okay.
honestly, when the radar energy hits something and it reflects back, we don't actually know what it was until you start to really use other sensors to really narrow down what you're looking at. I mean, even the ground can reflect as something being there because it's just taking returns from electromagnetic energy reflecting off of something.
So then let me ask you this question then. If you have, I don't know, if you have a plane coming from 100 miles away, there's unless you knew it was one or the other, you wouldn't know what kind of plane it was, right?
No, you don't. Unless like
You know what I mean?
we'd have a guess based on a number of factors, but in reality, we may not know what plane that is. And there's different methods that can be used to identify whether or not it's an adversary or a friendly aircraft, especially if it's not speaking, like if you don't hear anybody on the radio or anything like that. There's ways that it can be identified, but in reality, like we're not 100% sure who that is out there or even what that is out there
Right.
until we
Okay.
until we really narrow it down, like as it gets closer.
Okay. So then how do you narrow it down? I'm just curious.
There's a number of ways we can do it.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, that'll get that's not the point of this conversation, but that's
Yeah,
interesting to know though, because I'm always looking at them. I'm like, there's got to be bullshit
yeah.
here. Okay. So yeah, let's talk a little bit more about the movie art. So they Top Gun Maverick, directed by Joseph Kosinski. Now I don't know how big of a movie buff you are, but Joseph Kosinski, uh, he he did the Tron sequel that came
I
out a
like that
bunch of
movie.
years ago. That was a good movie. He also did Oblivion, which I think might be with Tom Cruise.
Oh,
Um,
the where he like finds that he's like a hunter on the planet, and he like still wears his baseball cap, but he's actually just been replicated a bunch of times. Is that Oblivion?
that might be Edge of Tomorrow, or no. I don't remember Oblivion, but I do know.
I
Yeah,
think
yeah, yeah.
Oblivion is.
Well, I know it had something to do with like a round ship, and I think he wore like a
Yep,
white
yep.
futuristic suit. So I don't remember
That,
exactly what was going on.
that was a good
I
movie.
forget it. Yeah, yeah, I liked it at the time. Um, so this movie is really like an amalgam of a lot of Tom Cruise people, because
Hmm.
the writer of this movie, one of the writers, is Christopher McQuarrie. Right? Christopher McQuarrie wrote, I think, Jack Reacher, and then he started to direct a bunch of stuff. He's on his fourth Mission Impossible movie that he wrote and directed. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Um, So yeah, him and Tom Cruise apparently do a lot of things. So he just brought everybody that he knew in this, plus Jerry Bruckheimer, the producer of the first one. The actors, Tom Cruise obviously is back as Maverick. Val Kilmer is back as Iceman, who has a very small scene, but it's good that he was in the movie.
I think they
Um,
absolutely positively needed to have Val Kilmer. I know Val Kilmer has his health issues, but to leave Iceman out, I
right.
thought would have been an absolute tragedy, especially with how like how they portrayed how their relationship had become like this very um, mutually needed relationship and friendship throughout that movie. I thought was a perfect kind of ending to be like, hey, we all know Val Kilmer is not going to be with us much longer, and to kind of give him
Right.
this tribute as his last, moment as Iceman, I thought was a really important thing, and I really enjoyed the fact that they included him in it.
Yeah. Well, last moment as Iceman, because I guess we're going to talk about spoilers. He dies in the
Oops.
movie. Okay. Yeah. So I'm sorry. A couple minutes ago, we can put up the spoiler alert, but of course, it's the first thing that they say about him. The other thing that I like about him too is that he did have a plot purpose.
Yeah,
Like his character had a plot purpose. You know what I mean? He was the one covering Maverick's ass for a majority of it,
yeah,
and then when he didn't, he got pulled, and then he had to put his big dick moment out there and say, "Look, I'm going to do it and show you how to do it," and then he did it.
yeah.
So that was cool. I like that part of it. I like that they used his character for something good.
And that was like that was like the even go back to the first one where Maverick loses his confidence, and
Right.
you juxtapose that against this one where Maverick had even admitted he's like, I'm not an instructor, like I don't know how to instruct these kids, like I'm a an operator, and that's one of like a military term. Like there's some people that can instruct, and there's some people that's like, I know how to do this,
Hmm.
you can watch me do it, and that's one deal, but I can't really teach you how to do it. And that was the problem with him, is that he didn't know how to teach these kids how to do what he already knew how to do. And I think going and especially with like, what do I do about Rooster? Like Rooster has
Hmm.
meant the world to him after losing Goose, and I think Maverick was at the point where he like lost his confidence, and the one person that had actually chipped away at his confidence a little bit in the first movie and helped him regain that confidence in the end was also the person that helped him regain the confidence in the second movie, as almost like a parting gift, like, hey, I'm going to die, this is my parting gift to you. I'm going to help you remember that you are Maverick. Like at this
Right.
moment, I'm going to help you remember that.
Yeah. 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 It was good to see him. Apparently, I guess they use they used a computer to generate his voice, or maybe an AI or something like that,
That's
if I
what I heard.
remember reading, or something like that, um, which is a bummer. Can't talk. Miles Teller is Rooster, who is
Yeah.
Goose's son from the first movie, who is in the first movie for a second as a little kid. I forget what else Miles Teller is in. I don't know if I've ever really seen him in a movie. I've heard his name. I know
Oh,
he
he's
was in
been
the movie where he was a drummer and what's his face won an Oscar for
Whiplash.
it. Whiplash, right? Which I didn't
Yeah.
see. It's one of those movies that's like a gap in my movie.
Oh, it was
You know
good.
what I mean?
Yeah. I can't remember his antagonist, the name of the actor of his antagonist in that movie, but that guy, he's the kind of guy that will really get under your skin. Miles Teller was in Fantastic Four, and he was also in that boxing movie. I can't remember where he played the guy who was going to fight Roberto Duran, but he got into a car accident. He was in the new Footloose, the remake of Footloose as well.
Oh, I didn't see the whole thing. I'm not gonna lie and say I watched it because I didn't. I watched part of. I watched part of it. Okay, my girl was
Yeah,
finishing up watching it, and
I
then
thought I
finally
thought
on
Miles
the
Teller, for
yeah.
when he got dressed and he was like looking very much so like his father. I can't remember who the actor who played Goose in the first movie's name off the top of my head,
Anthony
but I
Edwards.
thought he played a really good version of like what Goose's son would look like. With the
Right.
mustache and the glasses. When he walks in to the bar and he sits down and starts playing Great Balls of Fire, like that's what Goose looked like at the bar, at the piano in the first one. So I thought they did a phenomenal job with transforming Miles Teller into Goose's son.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I thought that too. I really did think it looked a lot like him, and um, yeah, the mustache helps.
Yeah.
Love
Without the
it, a big
mustache, you're like,
mustache.
all right, that's Miles Teller. With the
Hmm.
mustache, you're like, that could be Goose's kid.
Definitely.
I
And
thought
then
I thought
lastly,
Hangman's character was phenomenal as well. Like
which
that
one was Hangman? Oh, that
Hangman was,
guy. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
Iceman
His
2.0, like
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, his foil.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, he was. Yeah, I thought that my girl was going to pull a muscle in the theater when she saw him without a shirt on. So it makes me hate him. But no, I don't. No, but he was good though. He was good.
I
I
like
kind of
they didn't
saw
really
him
use him very
coming
much.
back at the end though to save him. So you
Yeah.
know,
I mean, I that's the thing is I like that they didn't use him very much. That you're like, all
right?
right, this is the best of all of those people out there, and Tom Cruise is still like, you're not a team player. I can't have you on this mission. Like it just can't be that way. But yeah, you do kind of, spoiler alert, see him coming at the end to save the
Yeah.
day.
Okay, and then let's finally just hit the other one real fast. Jennifer Connelly is in the movie,
Yeah.
playing a character from the first Top Gun that we've only heard about.
You know,
Okay.
when I first watched this, I first watched the movie after we left the movie theater. My wife was like, I didn't care for the love story. Like, why did they need to include that love story? And at first, I was like, well, it's because they had a love story in the first one, blah 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 blah. And then I went to work and I started talking about the movie with a couple of the dudes at work who've seen it. And I was like, I started saying, I'm like, I could have taken or left the love story. And my one subordinate was like, no. He's like, she was so important. He's like, you don't remember her from the first one. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, Jennifer Connelly's character, Penny Benjamin,
Yes.
was the admiral's daughter that the
Yes.
bald commander is yelling at Maverick about in the first one. And I'm like, oh, it all makes sense now. Like how he had this like weird love relationship with her, and why they brought her back. And it's like, I get why they didn't bring Kelly McGinnis back. And Kelly
Yeah, I
McGinnis,
think we all kind of know why.
yeah. I mean, she was interviewed where she was like, "Look, I'm not a smoke show anymore. Like, what do you want me to do? Like, I got old. Like,
All right.
sorry, there's nothing I can do about it." And the fact that my subordinate, once my subordinate told me like, "Hey, that was the admiral's daughter that was brought up in like split second in the first one," it all made sense to me. And I told my wife, and she's like, "Oh, it makes sense now."
Um, and she still looks pretty good, Jennifer
I'll tell
Connelly.
you what,
They
for 50
have a.
something years old,
She is like 50 something, isn't she? She's
I
like
think she's
100
like
years old now.
52, something like that.
Damn.
She looks really good.
So let's talk for a minute about about how they made this movie. So making the movie. So Joseph Kaczynski has only, I believe, worked with one director of photography, and that's Claudio Miranda. Claudio Miranda won an Oscar for Life of Pi,
That was a good movie.
but he also worked with Kaczynski on Tron and on Oblivion.
Mm,
So he shot this movie, and the big deal with this movie is that they're able to basically put very high definition cameras into the cockpits of these things.
yep.
Now, I have not been in the cockpit of an F-18. I imagine there's not that much room to fit a camera. I do know how big cameras are,
Yeah.
so to do that is a hell of a feat. Now, let me ask you, if you know this, are there actually cameras now in modern fighter jets? Like, I mean,
So
they don't have like the equivalent of like a GoPro always looking at like a pilot for some reason.
I've flown in the backseat of an F-16, and
Hmm.
I'm 6'1", 240 pounds. I'll tell you right now, there's not a lot of room. When you get strapped in, like, and you're taking off, there's just about enough room for your arms to sit and hold on to the handles before you take off. Like that's, and then because you got your screens, your heads-up display, your stick, your throttle. There's not a whole lot of room.
Right.
Um, are there regularly cameras in the airplanes? No,
Okay.
because um, we don't want, as a community, for what is seen on our screens to be recorded. We don't want that being recorded. Have there been times where GoPros and stuff are added to airplanes? If there's like a public affairs mission, sure. But then those recordings are heavily scrutinized. But no, there's not regularly cameras in those airplanes.
Gotcha. Okay. I guess I don't really know why there would be if I think about it, because it's not like you're going to see anything. Like, I mean, all of the pertinent information that they're going to get from the pilot, they're going to get through voice, right?
Yeah,
So
there's you get voice. Then you can pull information out of other systems on the aircraft to determine what was going on, whether that's any of the pods on the aircraft or anything like that. But no, there's really no reason to see like the pilot's face, if you will, while they're flying. I mean, we
okay.
don't really have the ability to like send that information down so that we could like look at the pilot while he's flying and be like, "Hey, bro, you're looking a little pale." Like we don't have the aircraft are too far away to even send that signal back.
Okay, all right. So let's actually talk about the very beginning of the movie. The very
Yeah,
beginning of the movie, we see Tom Cruise, and he is farting around with his P-51 Mustang.
I love that
Um,
plane.
yeah,
That's what
it's a
my
good
father
looking
was
plane.
flying that plane.
Yeah, that's definitely a good looking plane. I I mean, look, I have a working knowledge of things like planes and aircraft and stuff like that. My dad was not in the military, but he did fly a little personal, single prop plane, you know what I mean, as a hobby. So just from
Yeah,
talking to him and understanding and, being interested in flying video games, you know what I mean?
yeah,
You
yeah.
learn a lot about this stuff. Um, I thought that the plane that he was going to test fly was like going to be like some sort of like an SR-71 or something. But what is that plane? They called it a Dark Star, and I didn't start diving through Wikipedia to know about that plane.
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. Okay, well that's good to know.
You can,
Thank God I
you
didn't
can,
start looking for something that doesn't exist.
and all of a sudden the FBI is knocking on your door, like, what kind of secret
Right.
stuff you looking for?
I just
Um,
watched the movie with Tom Cruise.
on totally unclassified, you can Google it. The Chinese thought that that was a real plane, so
Oh,
they were trying to
really?
research, like, what did you find? Like, what is this plane? Like, what are the Americans working on? Kind of stuff. But no, it's not a real plane. Doesn't exist.
And
But
is
there
Mach
was
10 completely unreasonable in an
oh way
aircraft that
insanely
that
unreasonable.
isn't a that isn't a space shuttle? You know what I
I mean,
mean?
you're talking like beyond hypersonic weapons at this point.
Right.
And those and
Right. And
hypersonic weapons are unmanned platforms. Like, um, yeah, no, you're not the human body right now is not going to get to Mach 10. And I mean, don't get me wrong. There's someone in the world. There's probably somebody in the classified realm that could dispute with me on that, and that's totally fine. But um, from what I understand, like Mach 10 is just not something that we're going to achieve right now, especially with a manned platform.
all right.
One
Gotcha.
one thing that you did see, and some people might not have noticed, is that there's a skunk on the back of that airplane's vertical
I saw
stabilizer.
that. Yeah.
So
Yeah, I know that
that's an
one.
homage to Skunk Works,
Yes.
the people
Well,
that build things like the SR-71 and stuff like that. So they were giving them just a little bit of a shout out in the movie to say, hey, you've built a lot of planes like this. Like we're gonna let you have your moment in this movie.
there were parts of the inside of that plane that they showed, which doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And it says Lockheed Martin on it.
Yep.
It says just, because obviously, like, who else would they go to? Boeing? But it would be Lockheed Martin.
Probably.
Um, and I think Skunk Works is where they developed my favorite plane as a kid. I think with the F-117 Nighthawk.
The F-117. Yeah. What I used to love those planes. Funny funny story about
It's
the
the most badass
F-117.
looking plane in the world. I mean,
The problem is the F-117's engines were too powerful, and it used to blow the tail off the back of it, so they had to retire the airplane.
that's a
Also,
good reason.
when we lost one over Bosnia, and we basically it proved that stealth technology isn't what we think it is, especially at that time. So we were like, all right, well, if legacy surface to air missile systems in Bosnia can shoot down our F-117s, they're not worth what we thought they were worth. Um, but yeah, so the F-117 is actually not an F platform because it's not a fighter.
It's not a fighter jet.
It's a bomber. But the problem
Yeah.
is it flew like a fighter, and they needed fighter pilots to fly it. But fighter pilots in the Air Force will not fly something that has a B in front of its number. And bomber pilots aren't qualified to fly the F-117 the way they would fly their bombers. So they had to name it the F-117 even though it was a bomber because they needed fighter pilots to fly it. One of the former fighter pilots that I worked with when I worked with F-16s, he actually flew F-117s in Gulf War One, and he was telling us all about it and stuff. So fighter pilots flew the F-117s.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, we had to trick
Um,
the pilots into doing their jobs.
okay, so going through the plot. So again, all right. So basically, Maverick decides that he has to push the envelope, of course, again because General Ed Harris is coming to arrest him.
He's going to
So
shut the program down. Yeah.
he's going to shut the program down. Um, so he goes to Mach 10 and ends up having to eject, I guess.
Yeah, that's not going to
You
happen.
can't eject that Mach 10. I mean, you can't eject that Mach 10. It's ridiculous.
There was an article recently that talked about a pilot that ejected it like I think it was like Mach 1.2 and was like it was miraculous that he survived. Um, but interesting, like you're saying that is I actually read a fan theory about this film, in that they're saying that the whole sequence that happens after Maverick ejects is all of right before Maverick dies during the ejection or during the burning up
Oh,
of the
okay.
airplane,
Right,
and
right,
then
right,
like
right, right.
reconnecting with Rooster, saving the day one more time, getting Penny
Right.
Benjamin, you know, all of that,
His
all the
last
things he wanted to
synapses
do.
are firing, and it's
Yep,
Top Gun 2.
yep. But
All right.
fan theory, whatever. But yeah, you're not you if an aircraft breaks up at Mach 10.2, which is I think what he was at, you're not surviving that. Like it's just not
Right.
gonna happen. You're burning up with the aircraft, and it's gonna be like you're burning up really fast.
So Maverick survives.
Yeah, the movie Maverick
Maverick
survives.
somehow survives and ends up in like a bumpkin town. I forget
Yeah,
where he ended up. And
probably somewhere over Nevada.
right, I think they say that.
Yeah,
And he they pull him in. He's like, "Listen, look, I know what you did was stupid, but we now have to give you the most important job in the entire world." Which is, hold on, like it's really not a joke. It's the most important job in the entire world. There is a mission, a apparently unsanctioned mission to blow up a nuclear material enrichment plant
yep.
from an overseas country that is advanced enough to have what they're calling Generation Fight 5 fighters, which are the equivalent
Fifth
of
jet
like
fighters. Yeah.
RF-22,
Yep.
a very advanced fucking plane. And while we don't hear who it is, and there are theories out there, this would literally start World War III.
It would start the end of civilization as we know it
Right.
easily. Um,
And
and yeah,
we
there.
need
So
Tom Cruise, which is why he's in the movie, which is why
yeah,
we made
we need Tom Cruise to pull off this mission that nobody in the rest of the world can pull off.
it. Right.
This 50-something-year-old fighter pilot that
Right.
hasn't flown a fighter plane in 20-something years, and he's going to go fight. He's going to go fight fifth gen fighters, which yeah, you're right. Nobody ever says what adversary that we're going to attack. And
Right.
when I went to work, where there were people that were like, "Oh, we were going after Iran," and I was like, "Look, man, Iran doesn't have mountain ranges like that. There's not snow-capped mountain ranges in Iran." I was like, so the plane, the fifth gen fighter that they show in the movie is a real plane, and it's called. It has a couple names. The Su-57 Pac FA T-50, and it's a Russian airplane.
Russian
It was,
aircraft, that I know.
it was the Russians' copy of our F-22. Um, but yeah, we don't talk about who we're going to attack. And what's funny is that they're like in the plot in the movie, they're like, we're going to use our adversary is going to use the most advanced fighter airplane that they have, which is equivalent to our
Yes.
F-22.
Yes.
But we're going to send in our 1980s Super
Yes.
Hornets, or
Yes.
1980s upgraded to 1990s Super Hornets. Maybe they upgraded the radars. I don't know. To fight fifth gen fighters that
Mm-hmm.
have the capability to do what you saw them do in the movies, but we're going to
Yes.
protect this site with 1970s surface to air missile systems.
Mm.
It's like that doesn't make sense. Like what?
Mm.
The adversary is not. So the missile system you see in the movie is an SA-3 missile. It is a surface-to-air missile, radar-guided. They're Russian systems, much like the aircraft is a Russian system, but they park these things on mountain ranges, which is kind of unique in itself because you do park if you put surface-to-air missile systems on mountains, that's one thing, but if you get below those mountains, they're not going to be able to see you because they're radar-guided systems. Um, but then to be like, all right, we're gonna go fight fifth gen with our fourth gen, maybe fourth gen plus fighters. That's just not a fight we would want to get into, like, at all.
So they had to shoehorn in a reason as to why the filmmakers are going to go through this nostalgia trip and use old fighters. Okay,
Yep.
because to use the F-16 would be so ridiculous that the FA-18 is less ridiculous somehow. So apparently, I went back and I tried to. I learned why. Apparently, the idea was there's GPS blocking in an area, and they can't use a plane with GPS in it. So instead of the most advanced fighter we have to again go on the most important mission in the United States right now because it will start World War III, okay? Instead of using an F-35 or an F-22 even, we go back and we use an F-18.
I think the GPS thing is total bullshit.
I think so too.
Um, all of our aircraft have GPS in them. I
Right.
think that the DoD was like, we're not letting you use our F-22s. We're not letting you use our F-35s. Um, you can use our F-18s, and then we'll make up some story about why. Because I mean, look, F-22s, F-35s cost an inordinate amount of money to operate. F-18s, not quite so much. Um, F-22s and F-35s require even more specialized pilots, and the likelihood that we
You
would
have
like,
Tom Cruise.
yeah,
What more do you need?
going back to the question about putting cameras in the aircraft, there's no way on any given Sunday that the DoD is going to allow cameras in the F-22 and F-35 cockpits. It's just never going to happen
So
at
they're
all.
that important. Those planes are that important to the Air Force, I guess.
Yes.
I mean, and the F-18 isn't.
The F-18, it's important. The F-16 is important, especially as they get upgraded, but they're not the same. They're on different levels. Um, the F-22s and F-35s are just that important. No cameras going in those aircraft.
Right. No,
So
that
yeah,
does make sense.
we can say, oh, there's something about the GPS. No, the DoD wouldn't like cameras in the F-22s and 35s.
Oh,
And don't get me wrong,
okay.
I'm not speaking for the DoD. That's just what I'm guessing.
Right.
I'm guessing
Right.
with a
Right.
certain degree of certainty that I think they're
Yeah.
not going to
No,
let
it
cameras
makes. Yeah, it does make some sense. So, in order to accomplish this mission, we have Top Gun again.
go back to Top Gun.
We have a bit of a competition between guys and gals now. We have a couple characters come back from long. So we have Warlock, who was one of the guys that was in Top Gun with Maverick in the first movie, and obviously we have Val Kilmer. What's his name doesn't come back? Tom, not Selleck.
Oh,
The guy with
main
the mustache. Is he dead?
Viper. Viper didn't
Yeah,
come
yeah,
back,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
I guess they
Chester didn't
had.
come back either.
It's true. It's true.
The one thing
Um,
I wish they would have done, I wish. So when Goose died and they had to he had to get a new backseater or a new reel as they called it, and he got that I don't know the actor's name, but he had the black guy who was his reel. I was so hoping that that guy who played his reel in Top Gun 1 was going to be the admiral who was the black guy in Top Gun 2, as if to be like, I'm cheering for you, because he does, like, the admiral is not John Hamm, is essentially cheering for Maverick the entire movie to be like, yes, please be successful. And I was
right.
so hoping that the same actor would just be like, go from, we'll just bring him down, much like we had Val Kilmer, um, continue to succeed. I was so hoping that same guy would be in the movie as just like, he's a two-star admiral, just like Maverick should have been, but it was a different actor.
Yeah, yeah. It wasn't the same guy, but at least they had. They just some cohesion. I like, you know what I
A
mean?
little bit crazy.
You
Yeah.
know, try to go through. So we have you learn. All right, so we have the Top Gun begin, the competition begin, and you have who's a hangman was uh, Miles Teller's
It's like his nemesis.
adversary in it.
Yeah.
So um, one of the things that was interesting, they didn't show really, other than everyone getting shot down by Maverick, they didn't necessarily show anyone making mistakes.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like these are the best fighter pilots that you can get.
Yep.
So for them to be like, well, I went left when I was supposed to go right, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
if I remember, they didn't necessarily treat them like boobs as much as they just couldn't do what Maverick asked. You know
Right.
what I mean? And
Right.
and they would and he would basically fuck with them every chance that he got to
Yeah.
prevent them from doing it, which was
Yeah.
interesting because to him, and I think this is probably a little bit of his character, is that he had to win. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? He had to, yeah, sure. He put these people in situations that they can never get out of. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? It's the Kobayashi Maru from Star Trek. You know what I mean? It's like, well, what could you have the worst choices in the world that you can make, as opposed to
Hmm.
just doing what he was supposed to do, which was just show him how to fucking do it. You know what I
So,
mean? Just show it that
so,
it could be done in order to make sure that they knew they could listen to him.
yep.
You know what I mean? He wasn't leading by example, which is
So,
like business 101.
and so 2 points. One, Maverick flat out told him like, I'm not an instructor. Like, I don't know how to instruct them. And you're right, they weren't doing anything wrong. And so the Air Force has a program, just like, so the Top Gun program in reality is in real life is not called Top Gun. It's called like the Joint Strike Fighter Tactics Course or something like that in the Navy. The Air Force has a program called Air Force Weapons School, in which intel people and pilots get to go through this program. And the idea is not that when you leave these programs, you know how to do all these crazy maneuvers or really you know how the aircraft operates up until its operational limits. You know how, where you can push limits and things like that. But a lot of what those schools teach you is, one, how to conduct combat operations. Not necessarily like, oh, I'm going to do all this crazy stuff that you've never seen in an aircraft before, but more so like, how do I take 4 aircraft or 50 aircraft, and how do I conduct an operation? And how do I coordinate all of that? And how do I take everything that I know and everything I know about all the aircraft in my package? How do I take all that and conduct operations? So it's not really so much of, how do I make the F-18 do 6 backflips and 3 barrel rolls and somehow come out behind my adversary and shoot him down with an AIM-9X. And that's what I think a lot of people think Top Gun and some of these fighter programs are all about, is how do I make my aircraft go woo bang,
Yeah, they had some of that I think is bullshit. They
um,
had there was one or two. Then again, I don't know if it's true. I don't know if it can happen, but there were situations where it looked like uh, basically the plane would rotate on an angle
are you talking
or
about the
rotate on a not an angle, on an axis. It would rotate on an axis that looking at it like there's no thrust sending it in that direction. So how does
so
it do it?
are you talking about like especially that adversary aircraft when it kind of does that weird spin over their cockpit?
Yes,
So that plane can do that.
it can
Um,
do that.
so there's
Do we
a
have
there
one that can do that?
sort of. Um,
Sort of.
here's the thing. While it seems like that's a really cool thing, it's a really cool thing for about half a second. And if it doesn't equate to what whoever's flying that aircraft to do, you've lost a metric ton of energy, and now you have to regain all that energy to get your forward momentum going again. But so a Pac FA or T-50 or Su-57, that has what's called thrust vectoring.
Thrust
So if you're
vector.
looking at like this little F-35 right here, this little F-35 has a one-way canister that just points straight down. The F-35 does not have thrust vectoring because all of its thrust is directed in one direction. where a Su-57, Pac FA or T-50, um, all of those aircraft have three-dimensional thrust vectoring, meaning that the cans on the back of that aircraft can rotate in different directions. So in theory with thrust vectoring, if the plane is flying like this, in theory with thrust vectoring, it can quite literally turn like this, fire, and go back to flying straight again. So when you saw that plane go like this, like in a weird position over the F-18, in theory, the Su-57 should be able to do that because it has three-dimensional thrust vectoring. Um, the F-22 has two-dimensional thrust vectoring, meaning that its cans only rotate up and down. And the idea there is how do we whip the nose of the plane around quickly so that we can get our shot off earlier than our adversary. And I knew that was gonna be a big thing. Like, can those airplanes actually do that? Yeah, they can. They 100% can do that.
Hmm.
It's wild.
Yeah, that knowing anything about like the way physics works and stuff, it does seem crazy.
Yeah, like
Um,
it probably shouldn't work like that, but with three-dimensional thrust vectoring, it can work like that.
okay, let's see here. All right, so going back, so basically we learn through uh, Tom Cruise eventually trying to bang what's her face, Jennifer
Penny
Connelly.
Benjamin. Yeah.
Yes, Penny Benjamin. That's right. Yes, we learn that the reason why the extra little wrinkle in the plot is that apparently uh, Maverick, I guess, pulled Goose's son's
Mm-hmm.
application to the Air Force or the Navy,
Yep.
rather,
Naval Academy. Yep.
and lost him for 4 years. Which I guess at that point maybe he went to college or maybe he didn't.
Yeah.
But um, that's kind of the that's the underlying real kind of meat of the dynamic between him and Rooster.
Yeah.
Um,
Him trying to regain Brewster's love or trust or whatever. Yeah.
right. Um, and then finally, something gets accelerated or something like that. It's like I don't know, something happened, and they're like, "We got to go do this mission like tomorrow." So he has to he has to pick in that scene of who's going to be
Well,
part of
there's a
everything.
key part in the plot that I think that you missed when
I missed. What did I
he
miss?
actually shows them that it can be done after John Hamm
Yeah, yeah,
fires him.
yeah, yeah. Oh,
Um,
that's right. Okay, yeah. I thought I mentioned that before, but maybe I forgot it. Maybe I was just thinking it. But yeah,
um,
basically, yeah. Once Val Kilmer dies, then there's no one covering him, so he
there's
gets
no one to
fired,
protect him.
basically.
Yeah, he gets
Yeah,
fired.
yeah,
And here's the thing, when he and then John Hamm's like, hey, look, you had 2 minutes and 30 seconds to do it before. I'm gonna give you 4 minutes now. And all the air crew is like, wait a minute, like you're telling us now at 2 minutes and 30 seconds there was a small chance that we were gonna have to fight fifth gen. At 4 minutes, we're definitely gonna have to fight fifth gen.
yeah,
And they had no confidence whatsoever that they can conduct this mission because they failed over and over and over and over and over. And then all of a sudden, on the scope behind them, a jet pops up, and John Hamm looks at it and goes, "Who the hell is that? Like, what are you
right,
doing out there?" That's one of those things like that would never happen.
right.
Like you're never gonna be able to just put your flight gear on, walk out to an airplane, gen it up, and just be like, "Oh, I'm gonna go take it out on the range today." Like that doesn't happen.
Well, it has his name on. I mean, does he not have the keys? Are there keys for it?
So
Is there like a key fob that they
for
have?
you need the aircraft fueled. The aircraft aren't just sitting there fueled like on a regular basis. Like you have to fuel the aircraft. And to start the aircraft up, you need like an auxiliary power unit that is a generator that gets the generator going in the plane. Like there's a whole crew to get this going. And once the pilot taxis away from the operations area or where the aircraft's parked, the weapons aren't armed yet. Like you still have to go to an area to arm the airplane because nobody wants live bombs sitting close enough to people that if they go off. So you have to go arm the airplane. So when he drops bombs, theoretically what they're saying is that Maverick took a plane that wasn't on a flight schedule, didn't tell air traffic control because essentially air traffic control has your flight plans, taxis out to the arming area, climbs
Hmm.
out of the plane that he's already been strapped into, somehow got the plane refueled and genned up, ready for this, and turned on by himself. Went out to the arming area and armed his own plane by pulling all the pins, climbed back in the airplane, plugged himself in, and then took off without being stopped by anybody of security forces or air traffic control. And then to
Hmm.
say, "Oh, I'm going to go into the range," and then be like, "Oh, you're not coming in. You weren't on the schedule today." He's like, "I'm going anyways." That doesn't happen. Like there are so many protocols in place to be like, you can't just walk out and steal an F-18. Like that doesn't happen.
Well, Tom Cruise is very charming,
He,
and
you
he
know,
could
he would
easily
charm any.
charm his way into, a military aircraft.
I mean, if Tom Cruise asked me for an airplane, I'd toss him the keys and be like, "Go get him, boss." But
Mm.
you know, so then he does it in 2 minutes and 15 seconds. And really, like him trying to drop those bombs by himself, the way he did, would be the equivalent of Luke Skywalker using the Force to shoot the those shots into the exhaust vent of the Death Star. Like
Yeah,
that's what
I feel like, I feel like the similarity here between a literal trench run and Star Wars, the final part of Star Wars, I think is
yeah,
just a trope that as easy as it is, I think we should just it's the world's most obvious thing.
yeah,
Okay, it's
yeah,
exactly
yeah.
what is at the end of Star
That's
Wars.
exactly what we're
Um,
doing here.
Now here's a question. Again, like forget all the extra stuff here. It would they are literally fine by the end of the movie. Okay, skip forward to the end of the movie here. So at the end of the movie, the final mission, they do the trench run. Okay, they survive the trench run. They, for some reason, I guess, have to go inverted and spin upside down instead of pushing down. They pull up and go upside down. They do it. How come they didn't just fire missiles at this thing from like the aircraft carrier? They fire Tomahawk missiles, like a shit ton of them, and they
Hmm.
blow up a runway. So they've already now attacked the enemy, okay, a foreign nation, okay.
Hmm.
Why can't they fire missiles at these two Su-57 planes that are flying around and shoot them down from the aircraft carrier? And how come an aircraft carrier can't, with a drone, or something, just drop a bomb on these things? Why do we have to do it? I know there would be no movie, but there's got to be a better answer. There's got to be a better answer than we're trying to make a movie. Come on, like what could be the logic of this?
So
Why
cruise
wouldn't
missiles.
we just do it all remotely?
So
Shoot everything down remotely.
cruise missiles are designed to hit coordinates. So they
Hmm.
don't just, and also cruise missiles don't fly very fast. I know you're seeing them flying over Tom Cruise's crew and they're just like whipping across the sky, but in reality, cruise missiles don't fly very fast, compared to like an air-to-air missile or compared to an aircraft flying like, 600 nautical miles an hour. A cruise missile can't hit an aircraft unless it's by accident. Um, Cruise missiles are designed to say, "Hey, boop boop boop, here's your coordinates. Go hit that target." And with a moving
Right.
aircraft, you're never going to be able to hit a moving target with a cruise missile. It's just never going to
Well, no,
happen.
I wouldn't imagine a cruise missile. I mean, like there is no anti aircraft weaponry on a boat like that. I mean, other than like Sea Whiz, which is like you got to be like right there.
Yep.
But I
So
mean, there isn't somebody that's just like, I don't know. I don't know, a mile. They can't hit a mile,
so those
maybe.
the cruiser first well, aircraft carriers don't have anything like that to defend themselves. Aircraft carriers use the aircraft to defend the aircraft carrier. Um, the cruise missiles came off of um, guided missile destroyers, cruisers, frigates. They may have something that can attack incoming aircraft, but the problem is those missiles are usually um, not. They don't usually have the legs to go as far as the Su-57s were away from uh, the carrier task group. Um, those Su-57s never would have gotten close enough to that carrier task group because they knew it was certain death if they got close enough. So yeah, there's really not a missile that would have had the legs to get as far away as Maverick and his crew was doing their mission.
Mm.
Is there other possibilities? Like, yeah, we probably could have taken a B-1 and used air launched cruise missiles, and then Tom Cruise doesn't have to do his role. Um, but yeah, a drone probably isn't going to drop a bomb big enough. Our drones don't drop bombs as big as what was probably being dropped from these F-18s. Um, Drones also have altitude uh, ceilings, which maybe that's an issue here. I don't know. I don't know how tall that mountain was. Um, there's a number of reasons why some of those possibilities aren't there. Um, yeah,
Or there's no movie.
or
Um,
there's no movie.
yeah.
Well, what's
Um,
funny is when they actually are getting into the fight, if you will, and those surface-to-air missiles that are coming after the aircraft. Um, I always thought this is funny, and Air Force people that kind of understand, and Navy operations people that kind of understand. This is one of our big hit the make believe button situations. So when you see these dudes just dumping flares all over the place, like trying to defeat these missiles, flares don't work against those missiles at all. Like not even the littlest bit. Like flares would not do anything because those are radar guided missiles that were shot at them. Flares only work against infrared guided missiles, and you can really tell the difference as an infrared guided missile kind of has a translucent or a semi-translucent cover on its nose cone, where a radar guided missile has just like your typical sheet metal covered nose cone, and the radar frequency energy you can get out of the nose cone. So the missiles that you were looking at in the movie are radar guided missiles. So to say, hey, flare, 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 that's not going to do anything. What you would need to use is chaff, but the problem is you can't see chaff come out of an aircraft because it doesn't do what flares do. So that's one of those make believe buttons for people that know how those systems work, and that I understand that they're not going to be like, oh, chaff, 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 because you're not going to see chaff coming out of the back of the aircraft like you'll see flares coming out of the back of the
now,
aircraft.
I've heard of chaff and I understand what it does, but what is chaff? I mean, I understand what
Chaff,
flare is. A flare is a flare.
yep. Chaff is essentially like hair, like as thin as a piece of hair, metal strips that are in bundles, and when you dispense them out of the back of the aircraft, it goes into the aircraft's jet stream, and it creates this big plume of just shards of metal in the air, so that when radar energy or radar energy hits that plume of sheets of shards of metal in the air, it will reflect that radar energy back and say there's something there, and it has the ability to try to trick a radar guided system into saying that's my target.
Ah, makes sense.
Much like with flares for infrared guided missiles, flares will tell the system, hey, that's my target, not the thing that's over here that just dumped those flares, or so we hope.
That's the plan, I guess.
Yeah.
So getting near the end here. So let's see here. Our heroes are shot down after Tom Cruise sacrifices himself. We think, really, just as planned
Saves Miles Teller.
to save Rooster. Rooster then goes and saves Tom Cruise by blowing up a obviously Russian helicopter. Um,
Mi-24.
um, and then gets shot down himself. And then they now have to sneak into a plane and somehow
Tom
get
Cruise Tom Cruise
yes.
getting shot down, in my mind during that movie, I literally went, "No!" And I'm not gonna
I was
lie,
kind
I'm
of
not
okay with it actually. I thought it would have been a good ending in that like there was no I don't know, he just did what he like that like he did something heroic. There wasn't no,
there was a
but
part
didn't
of
happen.
me, there was a part of me that thought, as sad as I am about that scene, I can deal with Tom Cruise dying right here as a hero to save Rooster, and then Rooster goes on to forgive him and all this other stuff.
Sure.
Uh, but I get it, it's still Maverick. It's Maverick's movie. I mean, it's literally Top Gun Maverick.
Right.
Excuse me. And then yeah, Miles Teller comes in and shoots down an Mi-24 Hind that is literally genning up its gun to blow Tom Cruise away. And then Rooster gets shot down by the Su-57s, and sorry, I think he got shot down by a surface to air missile. And then they have to go in and try to steal an airplane.
Right.
Again, we're gonna hit the make believe button right now.
Yeah.
Um,
So when they were talking about the mission and they were going over, it's like, so this is what you'll see. We have, fifth generation fighters.
Yeah,
and they got a couple F-14s, and I'm like, that'll play a part.
and that's kind of
Without a
coming to
doubt.
huge here because we in the preview you see where it has that like that gong sound and the F-14 comes over the mountain range. You had to know that the F-14 was coming in somewhere, and I highly doubt it was going to be Tom Cruise's mental image as he's dying after saving Rooster. But again, I think that's one of those like make believe button things where Tom Cruise knows how all that equipment works and can quickly train Rooster on how to gen up an F-14 that probably hasn't been flown in a long time, is arguably probably not fueled at the time. Um,
Right.
you know, and to be able to like take that thing out here, another one of these the things. So he gets away, right? They take off, loses his landing gear, on the takeoff, yeah, hitting a
Right.
building. Um, and he gets up in the air, and all of a sudden the Su-57s are coming up on him, and he's like, "All right, just put your mask on. Like we're gonna hide real quick, and hopefully they don't shoot us down." Um, no, again, is a make believe button because those Su-57s are not going to get that close, where you can do like a visual inspection of who's in the cockpit kind of thing. Like that's what they probably called them over radio a couple times, and when they didn't answer, they'd probably just shoot them down at that point. But
Right.
without that, Hangman can't save the day.
Right.
You ever
Um,
seen the movie White House Down?
with Jamie Foxx. That
No, it
one?
was a was it, I think it was Channing Tatum or Gerard Butler. One of them was like North Koreans apparently took over the White House or something like that. And the way they infiltrated Washington was to fly a C-130, as a small cargo plane, down the Potomac River, and two F-22s come within like
Oh,
50 feet of it, and they
right.
shoot the F-22s down. That's not how that works. Like you either answer the call, you don't answer the call. We're gonna do some maneuvers to try to get your attention. If you don't answer those calls, if you will, you're getting shot down. I think the same thing would have happened to Tom Cruise in terms of what the adversary would have done to be like, hey, you're not answering our calls. We're not going to pull up next to you so that Tom Cruise can hit the brakes, light this dude up, with the F-14 Tomcat's gun, and then try to go, balls to the wall against the other Su-57 flying around through the trenches. Like that's just not going to happen. Like they're going to shoot him down much earlier than that.
Your final thoughts on the movie. I know obviously it's a fun movie and there is some stuff that, like you said, you got to turn your brain off a little bit, especially with everything that you know about what you're
Yeah.
looking at. What were your thoughts generally on the movie?
I absolutely love the movie. I loved it. I was a
Okay.
super big fan. Um, I'll tell you right now, I was actually kind of apprehensive going into the movie at first, and one reason was, so I've done an entire briefing on the Chinese influence in Hollywood. Like I put together a briefing on the Chinese influence in Hollywood, and if you look at um, the original like posters of the movie, is Tom Cruise has his 1986 jacket on with all the patches on the back of it, and in 1986, the Japanese and the Taiwanese flags are actually on his jacket. If fast forward to right before COVID, when the movie was supposed to be released during COVID, they started putting the movie posters out, and if you look at the back of his jacket, they removed the Japanese and the Taiwanese flags. Now that's
Hmm.
because there's three things you cannot talk about in a movie in China: Tiananmen Square, Taiwan, and Tibet. So removing those flags, and they also don't like the Japanese. But I was actually pleasantly surprised that when I saw the movie, Tom Cruise actually had the Japanese and the Taiwanese flags re-added to his jacket because there was so much backlash against the fact that we are appeasing the Chinese. Um, but so I wanted to see it really bad, but I was a little bit apprehensive to be like, are we going to reduce our American bravado mindset in this movie, or what are we going to do? And in reality, we absolutely loved. I absolutely loved the fact that we got to see, American exceptionalism in our military again in a movie. And from what I understand, the Chinese are pissed off about it, but who cares? Um,
Uh,
we so I love the fact that they did realistic. I love the fact that Tom Cruise put the actors in airplanes and saw, because I've flown an F-16. I know what 7 to 8 G's feel like, and your face is literally doing this while you're trying to fly, and it's painful and it's uncomfortable. I loved it, even though you have to hit the make believe button. That's fine with me.
I thought it was really good. I was worried going into it, and I'll tell you why. I made the mistake of that the first couple of days that it came out. I really try not to have my news feed filled up with anything very partisan on
Hmm.
purpose. So much so that anytime like there's an article of something that comes out in the news, I will purposely stay away from incredibly, notably biased news sources. But what happens is when I go to work, I'm not logged into anything, and so it spits everything at me.
Yeah.
So I'd seen something, and apparently, as soon as Maverick, the movie, made something like $300 million or something like that, a very conservative news outlet put up a big headline in the Google News feed, something about how liberals are upset that Maverick made $300 million and blah 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 blah. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, fuck. I really didn't want to go see the movie actually after that because I was
Yeah.
worried that it was going to be this bullshit, jingoistic, uh, just dumpster fire of a movie
Yeah.
where the idea of pushing America and its exceptionalism uh, to the point of nauseum, I can't
Yep.
stand. This movie was none of that.
Hmm.
Like I didn't feel it. I mean, yeah, no. Look, obviously, look, we have very attractive people doing very fun and interesting and fun and attractive things. Okay, and
Yeah.
it's dangerous and it's fast and it's exciting.
Yeah.
That's great. There weren't well, there were a couple of big American flags, but it wasn't. They didn't have a political message, which I was really
Yep.
happy about. So
I
much
agree.
so that they're just like, we don't, they're just like, the enemy is the enemy. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like there was nothing to say about it other than that's the bad guys. You know what I mean? Similar to what they did in the first movie. I don't remember them actually saying it was Russia. You know what I
I
mean?
don't
Which is what I
understand.
always
Yeah.
figured it was because it was in the 80s, you know.
Yep. Yeah, I
Um,
don't remember who they said. The only reason I would assume in the first one that it was the Russians because they call them MiG 28s. The
yeah,
MiG
they're
20.
MiGs, which yeah, I know a MiG is a Russian plane.
Yep.
But they were MiG 20. There is no MiG 28.
Nope. There is no such thing as a MiG 28.
There is no such thing as a MiG 28. That I know too.
And the planes you see flying in there are F5s. Like they're trainer planes today.
Are they really?
Yeah.
Oh, wait, thinking about what they look like. Yeah, they're what's it? No, the F4 Phantom. What's the F5?
The F5
F5
is
is
a
just the
small.
F5?
We
No, no,
we
no,
use.
no, no. But there's a name for it
Oh, I think it's
because
like
there's
the
the
F5
F4
Tiger.
Phantom,
Yeah.
then there's
Yeah.
F5 something.
I think it's F5 Tiger. I don't know. It's something like that.
I don't
Um,
remember.
but we sold them all to like other small countries.
Right. Because now we can shoot them down with our digital planes. I don't know
Yeah.
what planes are. This has been this month's edition of the Nerd Enthusiast Movie Podcast. Thank you to Brandon for being on the show and definitely adding a bunch of insight I knew nothing about. You know what I mean? And to get a movie like this, which is filled with interesting technical things, and to understand that it's all still a bunch of movie bullshit is really
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
Again, make sure, please, you follow all of the social medias. There will be a little box down at the bottom saying what they are because I refuse to list them anymore. Um, I'll let you know one more thing. So the shout out that I wanted to talk about was Bernardo again. Bernardo, if you're watching and you want, go up on nerdenthusiast.com and send us a message as to what movie we should watch for the next episode. Okay, we'll get it, and it won't mean anything because it's going to be Thor. But thank you for being a Patreon. If you are not a Patreon, please consider it. Go to patreon.com/nerdenthusiast. Otherwise, this has been this month's edition of the Nerd Enthusiast Movie Podcast. Thank you for watching. My name's Dane. It's Brandon. Thank you.
Have a good one, man. Thanks.
Thanks. It was good talking to you. See you later.